Parkside students, how's it going? I know you're sitting at home, you're probably starting to get a little bit bored. I'm doing the same thing. My goal was to grow out a really cool mustache like Garrett's. This was supposed to be day 3 of the mustache, but I messed up trimming it. So clean lip, and now I gotta look at Garrett's awesome mustache every day and be reminded of my failures. But it's okay. We've got something a lot better than really bad mustaches today. What we have today is we have God's Word. We're gonna talk through a story today that's familiar to us. As I was working through what I wanted to share with y'all and what I was really seeking the Lord's heart in for us to learn, man, I came across a story that we'd actually talked about less than 2 months ago, and it's the story of Jesus calming the storm. And man, I just thought it was so applicable to what we're going through. So I want us to study this story again. So if you have a Bible, go ahead and open up to Mark chapter 4. We're going to be in verses 35 through 41. Normally I'd say, hey, I'll give you a chance to flip to that, but this is a video, so you can hit pause while you're finding it, and then you can jump right back in with us. So hit pause now while you're finding it. Welcome back. Now let's go ahead and read this verse. So starting in verse 35, it says this. It says, "That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let us go to the other side.' And leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion, and the disciples woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drown?' He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Quiet, be still.' Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm." I don't know if you've heard this before, but there's this common misconception about what it means to follow Christ, and what we think sometimes is that if we're following Jesus, that means everything is perfect. You know, you might hear somebody share their testimony, share their story about following Jesus, and it might end a little something like this. Hey, man, I chose to follow Jesus, and everything in my life has just been great since then. I don't know about y'all, but that's not my story, right? I didn't choose to follow Jesus when I was 9 years old, and my life has just been perfect ever since. In fact, I've probably had more struggles since then, just because I've lived more life. And so we can see clearly from our lives, and clearly from what Scripture shows us, that it's not just this magic fairy tale when you choose to follow Jesus. But the presence of trials does not mean that Jesus is not with us. The presence of COVID-19, the presence of quarantines, does not mean that Jesus is not with you. In fact, Jesus is with you in your home. As you're not able to really go outside anywhere other than the grocery store, maybe to take a walk around, and you're feeling lonely, Jesus is right there with you in the midst of all of that. You see, when we're in the midst of hardship, that's the time where we start to doubt that Christ is even with us. But what I want to tell you is that when we're in the middle of a hardship, when we're in the middle of a trial, when we're in the middle of the storm, that is the time. If you're going to pick any time to lean more fully into His presence, to lean more fully into who He is, and to rely more fully on His presence and His power, it's not the time to doubt Him, it's the time to press into Him. So while the presence of Jesus does not mean the absence of trials in our life, the presence of Jesus does mean this. It means the ability to overcome trials. You know, when we talked a couple weeks ago with the story I've shared with y'all, I've always found it funny. I've wondered, what was Jesus like when they woke him up in the boat? You know, they went and they shook him awake. And if I get kind of woken up from a nap, I'm not a really happy person. I'm not saying Jesus was grumpy, but I don't think He was probably as kind as He normally was. But Jesus stands up in this moment, and He walks up to the storm, and He completely calms it down. But know this, oftentimes we skip over this. This storm was no joke. You know, these disciples, many of them were fishermen, and they'd been fishing on this exact body of water for a large portion of their lives. And so if they're freaking out, if they're losing their minds over a storm, this storm is no joke. Right? If it was just a little bitty storm that comes up all the time, they would have been like, "Oh, it's fine, Jesus can stay asleep." But no, they're freaking out, and they're saying, "Don't you care if we're going to die?" These disciples were absolutely afraid of the storm, and they had good reason to be afraid. Experienced fishermen know when it's a bad storm, and so they had full knowledge of how bad the storm was. In fact, when we see Jesus eventually stand up and calm the storms, the word used there is rebuked. And the other times when that word is used, it's normally referring to Jesus casting out demons. And so we actually can pretty easily infer from this that this storm might have had demonic origins in its inception. So what we need to know about the storm is it was no joke, and on their own, the disciples would have died. On their own, the boat would have sank, and the disciples would have been carried under by the current, and they would have perished as a result of the storm. On their own, they were absolutely hopeless. But Jesus stands up, and he walks to the front of the ship. He holds out his hand, and he just tells the waves to be quiet and to be still. And at his word, the entire body of water is still. The storms dissipate, and everything is peaceful, and everything is calm. You see, there's something really powerful about the words of Jesus. There's something really powerful about when he speaks. And so this is why we say, hey, it's no joke when we say you need to be reading the Bible. It's no joke when we say, hey, your God time is incredibly important. Jesus' words are powerful, and we have them in the Bible. We have them readily available in our hands. We can look them up on the internet. We can have a hard copy of the Bible. These words are powerful, and we have immediate and constant access to them. So with that being said, hey, just real quick, I want to let y'all know on our website, parksidechurch.cc, we actually have a youth page, and every week I'm going to be posting a reading plan for us. Guys, I would really encourage you to take full advantage of that. This is not a time to be sitting back, but this is a time to press into Jesus, to press into his word, and to seek him more fully. You've got time, so make sure you're using it in the right way. Here's the last part. I want y'all to look at the last two verses now, verse 40 and 41. Here it says this. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And they were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." See, Jesus wasn't upset with the disciples because they were afraid of the storm. He wasn't upset with them because they looked at the waves and understood that these waves could kill them. What he was upset about was that they totally lost perspective. What he was upset about is they totally forgot the bigger picture, the end goal. They totally forgot the promises of Jesus, the things that he had said. They had totally forgotten all of that in the face of this storm. You see, Jesus had told them at the very beginning of this passage, hey, let's get in a boat and go to the other side. Jesus doesn't lie. When Jesus says something, it happens. And so when he says we're going to the other side, we're going to the other side. Jesus had also told them, hey, I've got a bigger purpose here. I've got a bigger purpose from my Father, the creator of all things. I've got a bigger purpose to accomplish. And if he died in a boat, he wouldn't accomplish that. Jesus had told them that they were going to go on to do incredible things. And they have these promises from Jesus, and they have these guarantees from Jesus. But in the face of the waves and the storms and the thunder and the lightning and the water washing over the boat, they forgot all of these things. You see, our tendency amidst chaos is to totally lose perspective. Our tendency when things are tough and we don't know what's going on and they're confusing is for us to totally succumb to what's going on around us. And that's not what Jesus wants us to do. Notice this though, at no point did Jesus look at them and say, you guys are babies for being afraid of those waves. Really? You're afraid of those? You guys are babies for being afraid of a little storm clouds. No, at no point does he make light of the storm. In fact, Jesus understands, yeah, this is a big storm. Jesus understands, yeah, this is something I gotta handle. This is something I need to calm and to still. Jesus was never making light of what they were going through. He was always pointing towards the fact that his Father is so much bigger, so much greater, and so much more powerful than the storm that they were going through. And in the same way, Jesus is not trying to make light of your struggles either. What he's trying to point you towards is a God who is so much bigger than all this. It's a relationship that's so much more important than all this. And as I was thinking about this story and meditating on it, I actually woke up this morning in my room and I was journaling out, and God just reminded me of this story from my life. Actually, the story of a person who's incredibly impactful in my life that I really wanted to share with y'all. And so I've mentioned to y'all before my grandfather. I called him Papa, and I loved him to death. He was my best friend. I loved spending time with him, hanging out with him. But the thing about my Papa is from the moment that I knew him, from the moment that I was born, he was dying. And he had everything under the sun. He had cancer. He was stuck in a wheelchair at all times. He really even couldn't control his bowels. And as he got older, he was also starting to lose his mind, lose his memory, and lose his ability to have conversations, to be able to remember things, and to be able to remember events. And so I watched my Papa go through all of that. But for a man who was dying, I've never met someone who was more full of life. And that's because of one reason. My Papa loved Jesus so much. You see, he had plenty to complain about, The fact that you can't even control when you go to the bathroom, that's something to complain about. The fact that you can't walk and you're in a wheelchair, that's something to complain about. The fact that you have cancer and it's gonna kill you eventually, that was something that he could have complained about. But you know what? I never heard him complain once in my entire life. Never heard him complain at all. You see, he understood that the things he was going through were hard. They were tough. They were overwhelming, and that he could not overcome them on his own. But what he understood more than that was that there was a God bigger than all of that stuff who loved him dearly and wanted a relationship with him and wanted him to share that with everyone around him. You see, my papa didn't allow the chaos that was his health to dominate the way that he acted. Instead, he allowed the sovereignty of God to guide his path and to lead him in making an incredible difference in our family and changing the community around him. So again, I'm not trying to make light of what's going on around us. This is scary. We don't know what's going on. This is confusing. I've never been through something like this, and really nobody else has either. So we're trying to figure this out, but in the midst of this chaos, in the midst of us not knowing what's going on, and in the midst of some scary stuff, what we can rely upon is that we know the God who's bigger than all of this, who's greater than all of this, and has an incredible plan for your life. So here's my challenge for you. And one of the greatest weapons that we have against chaos and uncertainty is the promises of God. See, because when he says something, it happens. When he says something, it cannot be overcome. When he makes a promise, it's greater than anything this world can throw at us. So here's my challenge for you. I want you to go on social media, preferably Instagram, and I want you to post 3 of your favorite promises from God. And whether that be something that he said about you, something that he said will happen, or something that he says, hey, I'm going to love you, I'm going to bring this to the table, and I'm going to be with you. I want you to write down those 3 promises and post them on your social media. And I want you to tag our student page, My Parkside Students, in it. Hey, we'd love to interact with you and see that stuff from you. And this would be really awesome for your friends to see during this time as well. I know this is a big leap, and maybe you're not somebody who posts about this kind of stuff on their Instagram, but I'd love to see all of this stuff from you. So that's my challenge for you this week, and we're looking forward to interacting with you. One last thing before we go. Hey, this Friday night is our first Friday Night Live. We are super excited for this. Myself and all of our youth leaders will be joining with you. We're going to be hopping on Zoom at 7 o'clock. We're going to hang out for a little while, and then we're going to break up into small groups, and we're going to talk about God's Word. Guys, this is a really great time for us to come together. I miss hanging out with y'all. I know y'all want to hang out with your friends too, and maybe you want to hang out with me, hopefully. Guys, we're excited for this. This is going to be a really awesome time for all of us to come together. So don't miss this, all right? Do not miss this. Your parents have the link to it, and if you cannot find the link for some reason, go ahead and DM our Instagram account, or you can text me and we'll get that to you. So hopefully we'll see you there, 7 p.m. this Friday. Love you guys. Stay safe.